Damage. I thought I'd sorted everything, but I always forget this bit. Good grief. What's a stream without little scuff? Anyway, hello everybody. Hi everybody! How are you doing? Yes, indeed, sandwich everyone. Sonali Data, Damn Daniel, Suction Cup Dan. Henry Stickman, you passed the qualified driver training in Stepford County Railway on Roblox. Stepford? That's a interesting name you've got there. I hope everybody's doing well. I hope everybody's ready for an evening of pretty much. Okay, so I'll go like this. Need to get everything open. Oh, by the way, I also have oh, wait a minute. That's better. The wrong stream for a second. Need to hide that. Right. Change this as well. Not initial question generation one. Yakko's universe in general, aren't we? By the way, we have entertainment now. Just one moment, please. It's like, short to add some. Give me a sec. Grab some. Here we go. This'll do it. Alright. Boom. Now. Is now. Watch your Paddington. Boys and girls, whilst I do my research. Yes, I did actually manage to properly reset the yawn counter. For once. I think it's still visible, so I can move like one note over there.
Mr. and Mrs. Brown first met Paddington on a railway station, which was how he came to have such an unusual name for a bear.
There we go.
They were waiting for their daughter Judy when Mr. Brown caught sight of him sitting on an old suitcase behind a pile of mail bags. As they drew near, he stood up and politely raised his hat.
Marmalade sandwich indeed. I should have said that. Marmalade sandwich.
No, said Mr. Brown. We were wondering if we could help you. You're a very small bear, said Mrs. Brown. Where are you from? Darkest Peru, said the bear. I'm not really supposed to be here at all. I'm a stowaway. I came all the way in a lifeboat.
Oh, that's Michael Gordon, isn't it?
Marmalade. Bears like marmalade. I used to live with my Aunt Lucy, but she had to go into a home for retired bears, so I migrated.
Of course it's Michael Gordon.
Oh.
Famously Michael Gordon.
Aunt Lucy always said she wanted me to emigrate when I was old enough, but now that I have, I'm not quite sure what to do next. As he bent down, the Browns caught sight of a label round his neck. It said, "Please look after this bear, thank you." It was the kind of label you couldn't possibly ignore, and in no time at all, things began to happen. Mrs. Brown thought of a name for him. Paddington. And while she went off to look for Judy, Mr. Brown was put in charge of ordering some refreshments. Paddington. Paddington. Come along, Paddington, said Mr. Brown. I expect you're hungry after your long journey. I am, said Paddington. Very. Paddington had never been taken out to tea before, and he was very excited. I don't suppose there are many bears who've been inside a buffet, Mr. Brown, he exclaimed.
trillion miles from one end to the other.
Actually, one with buns. I think perhaps I'd better sit down. Yes, said Mr. Brown, trying hard to pretend that he had tea with a bear every day of his life. Hello, Mrs. Brown, called Paddington as he caught sight of the others. Don't go away. We're in here. Watch out, shouted Mr. Brown. But he was too late. Paddington was already up to his knees in...
What matter of factly Michael Gordon just narrates
Henry,
this?
cried Mrs. Brown, what are you doing? What am I doing? Look at him. He's all covered in jam and cream. I've never seen such a mess. I don't know what the manageress will say. Or the taxi driver, said Judy. Taxi driver? Judy's right, said Mrs. Brown. We can't leave him here, not in his present state.
It's allowed.
Don't worry, Mrs. Brown, called Paddington. I'll clear up the mess. Bears are good at clearing up messes. Number 32 Windsor Gardens, please, as quickly as you can. Not too quickly, called Mrs. Brown. We've 2 more to come. Is that one of them? Asked the driver. He's covered in white stuff. It's only cream, said Judy. I dare say, said the driver. But Bears is 6
I'm going to regret
extra.
this with Google search, aren't I?
Sticky Bears is 9 pence. 9 pence extra.
There's 6 pence extra. Sticky Bears is 9
A
pence.
hard stare at the driver.
Bang.
He seemed to go a funny shade of pink. Gosh, said Judy, how did you learn to do that? My Aunt Lucy taught me, said Paddington. She said it might come in useful one day.
Let me just calculate
Well,
this.
said Mr. Brown. Are you sure we're doing the right thing? That, said Mrs. Brown, remains to be seen. I've never had a bear about the house before, but I have a feeling things may never be quite the same again.
See that. 80,128. 258. 58,080,200. I'm going to round this up actually to 9. That's 1,000, million, billion, trillion. Numbers to words calculator, please. Right,
When Paddington arrived at number 32 Windsor Gardens, the first person he met was the Browns' housekeeper, Mrs. Bird. Good afternoon, he said. I'm from darkest Peru, and I've come to stay. Peru, exclaimed Mrs. Bird. Good gracious, whatever next? Don't worry, called Judy. He's going to have a bath. Hold on, Paddington, I'm just coming. Did you say you're from Peru? Called Mrs. Bird. Darkest Peru, said Paddington. In that case, I'd best be getting some more marmalade in. Fancy knowing I like marmalade, exclaimed Paddington. Mrs. Bird knows everything about everything, said Judy. She sounds just like Aunt Lucy, said Paddington. The next person Paddington met was Judy's brother Jonathan. And while Jonathan put some bubble mixture into the bath, Paddington listened carefully to his instructions. There's some soap, said Judy, and a towel, and a brush so that you can scrub your back. Paddington felt he would sooner just sit in a puddle, but he didn't like to say so. It sounds very complicated, he announced. Well, said Judy, don't forget to wash your ears. They look very black. Black, said Paddington hotly. Black? They're meant to be black. At least, I think they are. For a moment or two, he toyed with the idea of whitening his ears with a toothpaste, but he soon gave that up. There were other, much more interesting things to do.
Watch damn ears.
was that? Exclaimed Mr. Brown. Perhaps it was Mrs. Bird, said Judy. Bang went our tea by the sound of it. Unaware of the alarm he was causing, Paddington busied himself making a foam map of South America. Some of the mountains were very high indeed, and he was about to mark in darkest blue...
1,000 trillion is a
when he
quadrillion. It's a
suddenly
quadrillion.
What is going on? Exclaimed Mr. Brown. Don't tell me Mrs. Bird's fallen in the washing-up water now. That's funny, said Jonathan. Talking of water... Gosh, cried Judy. Look. Paddington, he's in trouble. To say that Paddington was in trouble was to put it mildly. He tried calling out, help, fairly quietly, so as not to disturb anyone, and then much louder. Help! Help! Paddington, said Judy, you've still got your duffel coat on. I didn't want to get too wet, gasped Paddington. Only I think I have done after all. Help! Why ever didn't you pull the plug out? Exclaimed Jonathan. Pull the plug out? Repeated Paddington. Nobody said anything about that. I shall never, ever have a bath again, he said firmly. It's much too complicated. But before he went to bed that night, Paddington did have one more go. It's what's known as a dry bath, he announced. It's safer than using water, and it's much less messy.
Do 2023 doing an impression of Michael Hordern, you should ask. You should add.
The first morning in his new home, Paddington woke to the news that Mrs. Brown and Judy were taking him for a trip on the Underground. There was also a large tray of breakfast things beside his bed. So much seemed to be happening at once, he had a job deciding what to do first. So he started on the bacon. Hurry up, called Judy. We're going shopping and it's nearly time to leave. Coming, cried Paddington.
I'm sure the cookie jar is actually a British company. I'll have to look it up.
I've never been on an underground before, he announced. I'm not sure if you'll be going now, said Judy. Not with bacon sticking out of your suitcase like that. Look at it. It's for emergencies, said Paddington. Bears often have emergencies.
Thank you so much. I've got distracted by Paddington. I need to...
I've got one coming on now. It's very strange, said Mrs. Brown. I've never heard so many dogs. Perhaps it's the fine weather bringing them out. I don't think it's the weather, Mrs. Brown, gasped Paddington. I think it's my bacon. What's left of it? After the excitement of Windsor Gardens, Paddington found the Underground much more to his liking, and he hurried on ahead of the others. Everything seemed to have been thought of. There was a moving staircase, pictures on the wall. There was even a sign with his name on, showing which way to go.
Really strange subway system.
Paddington, cried Judy, you're going the wrong way. But it was too late. By the time he'd realized his mistake, Paddington was at the top of the stairs again. Here, said the ticket collector, what's all this? You haven't been anywhere yet? I think I must have made a mistake at the bottom, said Paddington. Bert, called the collector, there's a young bear here smelling of bacon. Says he's made a mistake at the bottom. I'm sorry, said Paddington. I'm not used to escalators. We don't have any in darkest Peru. Darkest Peru? repeated the inspector. Oh, well, in that case, you'd better get back down, but don't let me catch you up to any more tricks. You're worse than them dogs. Shoo, go away. There he goes again, cried Judy. Do something, Paddington. That, said Mrs. Brown, was a dangerous thing to say. I think he's done it. You again, said the inspector. I'll have you know escalators is for the convenience of passengers, not for the likes of young bears to play on. It doesn't seem very convenient to me, said Paddington. I've been here ages and I haven't got anywhere yet. We're supposed to be going shopping, said Mrs. Brown. That's as may be, said the inspector sternly, but pressing the escalator stop button without a very good reason is against the rules. Persons are expected to abide by the rules. Did you say persons? Asked Judy. That's right, and I've got my job to do. It's bad enough being pestered by dogs. Well, Paddington's not a person, said Judy. He's a bear. Isn't that lucky? Said the inspector. Well, don't let it happen again. I think you're a very kind inspector, said Judy. Don't you, Paddington? Very, agreed Paddington. In fact, he announced, I shall always travel from here in future. It's a very good station if you don't want to go anywhere, especially if you have an emergency on the way.
Very good station if you don't want to go anywhere. When did this show get so quotable?
Paddington had never been shopping in London before, especially at a store like Barkridge's. Equally, Barkridge's had never had a customer quite like Paddington, especially in the gentleman's outfitting department. We would like some bear's pyjamas, please, said Mrs. Brown. Bear's pyjamas, repeated the assistant. Has Madam tried something in government surplus? Indeed not, said Mrs. Brown. I've never heard anything like it.
Government surplus. I don't know why that's funny, but it somehow is.
And he gave the man one of his special hard stares. Yes, sir, said the assistant. At once, sir. He's been sleeping in his duffel coat, explained Mrs. Brown, and we don't want that. We certainly don't, agreed the assistant. Would the young gentleman care for something in stripes? They're all the rage just now. I'd sooner have something in spots, said Paddington. If I had a pair like these, I don't think I would ever get lost, not even if I fell out of bed by mistake. You can say that again, murmured Judy. The changing rooms are on the right, called the assistant. Don't go wrong. I do hope they fit, said Mrs. Brown. He'll be most disappointed if they don't. So shall we all, madam, said the assistant. So far, pyjama week at Barkridge's had been a disaster. In fact, Paddington was the first customer they'd had for days. But if Barkridge's were unhappy about their pyjamas, Paddington was even more upset by the state of their changing rooms. As far as he could make out, most of the doors were locked, and when he did find one which opened, he practically had to force his way through. On the other hand, once inside, it was all very different. It was more like the inside of a house, and he was most impressed. Paddington wasn't sure how long he slept, but he was suddenly woken by a very strange noise. It sounded just like rain, but as he looked out of the window, he had yet another shock. "Well," said a voice behind him, "what are you doing in our shop window, Bear?" "Your shop window?" repeated Paddington. He suddenly wished he hadn't bought such loud pyjamas. "Oh dear," he announced to the world in general, "I think I've been recognized." But to his surprise, the manager of Barkridge's was more than delighted with all that had happened. "Bear," he boomed, "you're what we in the trade call a trend setter. Since you went to bed in our shop window, those pyjamas have been selling like hot cakes. Look at them. They've all gone." And to show just how pleased he was, he offered Paddington anything he liked to choose in the store as a present. Paddington licked his lips. All the excitement had made him feel hungry, and he was tempted to ask for one of the hot cakes the manager had mentioned. Then he caught sight of the very thing, some Wellington boots. "I'd like a pair of these, please," he announced. "If it rains the next time I'm in bed, it'll stop the ends of my pyjamas getting soggy. That would never do, especially now you've sold out."
I think that's the active universe done.
One of the things Paddington liked most about living with the Brown family was that he made lots of new friends. The nicest one of all was Mr. Gruber. Mr. Gruber kept an antique shop in the Portobello Road, and most mornings they had their elevenses together. What Mr. Gruber didn't know about antiques wasn't worth knowing, and to enter his shop was like entering another world. So when he arrived one morning and found that his friend appeared to be washing one of his pictures, he was most surprised. "Don't worry, Mr. Brown," explained Mr. Gruber. "I'm only restoring it." "So?" Paddington looked at it doubtfully. "It doesn't seem to be one thing or the other, Mr. Gruber," he said. "Ah," said Mr. Gruber, "there's more in paintings than meets the eye. You see, in the old days, Mr. Brown, artists were often so poor they had to do their paintings on top of old canvases. Sometimes if you clean a painting, you find a much more valuable one underneath. Do you realize, Mr. Brown, this could be an old master?" "It looks more like an old mistress to me, Mr. Gruber," said Paddington. Paddington turned the matter over in his mind all the way home, and by the time he reached number 32 Windsor Gardens, he was very thoughtful indeed. Mr. Brown had lots of pictures, and one of them had been standing in the front room for several days now, doing absolutely nothing. "I think," he announced to the world in general, "I may try restoring it for him. I expect he'll like that." Paddington had a hopeful nature, but as time went on, he began to get a bit worried. Far from being restored, Mr. Brown's picture looked as if it would never be quite the same again. Worse still, there was no sign of another painting underneath. It was, to say the least of it, a mess. It was only when he tried turning it round the other way that he discovered there was a label on the back. It said, "Property of Mr. Henry Brown, entry for the Portobello Road Art Society painting competition, to be collected." Mr. Brown's painting had started out as a study of some boats on a lake. Now it looked more like a storm at sea. Even with real paints, Paddington wouldn't have fancied his chances of repairing the damage, but with only tomato sauce and marmalade to work with, he had a nasty feeling there might well be an even bigger storm before the day was out. Paddington went to bed early that afternoon, suffering from a mysterious attack of something called restoritis. It was a most unusual complaint, which had caused him to come out in red and orange spots. If they looked suspiciously like tomato sauce and marmalade stains, he managed to hide the fact behind a large bowl of calves' foot jelly, Mrs. Bird's recipe for all ills. It wasn't until much later on, when he heard a strange voice downstairs,
With
that
jelly.
he decided
Some
to
head
put in an
cheese, good
appearance
grief.
again. Remarkable use of colour, said the voice. Most unusual, using marmalade chunks instead of paint. To Paddington's surprise, Mr. Brown's picture was occupying a position of honour in the middle of the room, and on the frame there was a large red rosette. That means it's won first prize, explained Judy. I didn't know you painted abstracts, Dad, said Jonathan. I don't, said Mr. Brown, but I'd like to abstract an answer from whoever did do it. I was really looking for an old master, Mr. Brown, said Paddington, but I'm afraid it went wrong. It looks more like a young bear to me, said the judge. And I'll say one thing, it not only looks good, it tastes good as well. Try some. Thank you very much, said Paddington, but I think you'll find it tastes even nicer if you stand it the right way up. Soon after Paddington went to live at number 32 Windsor Gardens, Mr. Brown decided to decorate the attic so that he could have a room of his own. But like most of his jobs, it got left half done, until one morning Paddington decided it was high time he stirred things up a bit.
So I think I could probably say that we don't know how it got here because we don't know what exactly caused the Big Bang. Ben English, welcome to the stream. I'm doing some research. I think that's Byako's universe done. I shall move on to people wanting pepper.
Paddington
And to be
wasn't
fair,
sure
people do
how
want
long
pepper.
it took him to do the wallpapering, but he did discover one thing. Apart from making him hot, it also showed up the ceiling. The ceiling definitely needed whitewashing. that you, Paddington? Shouted Mr. Brown. Are you all right? Cried Mrs. Brown. Yes and no, answered Paddington truthfully. The plain fact was that when he'd started work there had been a window and a door. Now there was only a window left. Perhaps you'd better let yourselves in, he exclaimed, wherever you are. I think I must have papered myself in by mistake. Paddington expected to be in trouble, but when he was writing his adventure down in his scrapbook that night, he suddenly found himself with several extra lots of bun money. Mrs. Brown gave him some because at long last they had to have a real decorator in. And Mr. Brown's was because he hadn't wanted to do the job anyway. Bears, said Mrs. Bird, always fall on their feet. Perhaps you'd like me to decorate your kitchen for you, Mrs. Bird, said Paddington hopefully. No, thank you, said.
This discussion of kids' cartoons, especially British ones, makes me think about Australia and how inexplicably Australia, comes up with Australia consistently comes up with really good kids' TV. Bananas in Pyjamas, Little Lunch, and, well, Bluey. Bluey's a worldwide sensation. Straight out of Australia, homegrown, very Australian, and it's actually really good. Yep, the Down Under. The Down Under, which inexplicably creates lots and lots and lots of very good kids' TV. For some reason. If you expand it to New Zealand, there's also an adaptation of the Harry McClary books, which is also very good. I concur, Bluey is freaking amazing. I need to generate food. Generate food? It's because I'm looking at the lyrics to people want pepper on their food. I would love to be able to generate food. That would be amazing. But I need to generate some questions. Always show that closed while still in previews. I'd have to look it up. I really don't know if there's that much to probe here. I think there's not much to probe here. I'm gonna have a look here again. sec. Yes, I'm going on freaking Wikipedia. Ah, archive folder. Lord A. Wolf 1378. Welcome to the stream. How you doing? Currently researching. Right, what? Page 122. Okay. Researching things. 22. Page 122 isn't actually page 122, so I need to skip forward. I sure hope this text is in the public domain. Currently researching is just dude's bio right now. Pretty much. I'm going to copy that source. I can't believe I'm researching the Bible. Like the nation of the world and actually video. That's why I'm doing lots. That's why I'm doing more of them. Is salt overrated or is pepper underrated? Pepper is kind of underrated. And I mean that both in terms of Pepper Yarrow, my friend Pepper the Spider, and also the Pepper the Condiment. So now we're looking at.
So they piled on the spice and that made it taste nice, which resulted in something quite strange. It's hard to believe, but since Adam and Eve, our taste buds cause history to change.
Spice, but here we go. BBC. Here we go. In 5 minutes, I'm ending the stream. Ahead with the question, Lord Airwolf. I'm not setting up properly. No, I am. Try and find the source of this quote. This quote. I think I'm going to have to do some more research now, later even. So, what I'm going to do, I'm going to go ahead and find someone to raid. Because it's basically end of the stream. After she's streaming. You check both YouTube and Twitch. Oh, yawn. Yeah, Stubby's live. That's right, Stubby. Sounds sensible. Where is it? Hang on. There we are. Yep, go ahead, raid Stubby for me. Moderately productive day. And I'll see you guys probably tomorrow, actually. Latest.